Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It's an opportunity for me to have a special guest on the show, and we usually cover a topic relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And it's always an adventure to see where the discussion will take us. And I sometimes do field trips and tours of other spaces at Lilydale and beyond. And I encourage you to look at the archive videos of past shows of Wednesdays with Willa because this is year 6, not year 7, year 7 of episodes. I'm like, woo, and time flies by. So you can look back and enjoy, binge watch them. And you can even type in who your favorite people are that you'd like to watch the shows of. And you can find them on my YouTube channel as well. And you can listen on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio, because this goes out on the audio version podcast site as well. So lots of ways for you to tune in and enjoy Wednesdays with Willa. And I would like to introduce my special guest today, who is Colin Bates. Hello, Colin.
Hello there. How wonderful it is to spend this wonderful time with you once again. It is always such an absolute joy just to get together and have a chat. It's lovely. I love it.
Absolutely. And Colin is a very special person, as you can tell from his accent. He is not from America. He is from the other side of the pond. He is from the United Kingdom, and he is a well-respected medium, as well as being a mediumship teacher. You've worked at Stansted College for many years, being a tutor of Arthur Finley, and well respected in that field. And I encourage people to check out Colin's website, which is mediumcolinbates.com. He does offer mentorship and classes on that site. And I think it's wonderful that you're back with us again today, because you've been on the show before. We've covered great topics. Just so people can understand some more about Colin, he's worked so long in the field of mediumship that he's been able to explore some of those concepts. And when he's come on the show in the past, a lot of times I just let him talk. I just let him run, because it's just such a delight to hear him speak. And he's talked about palliative care. He's talked about spirit contact. And today our topic is exploring trance mediumship. And before we get into that, I just want to make sure that you understand this is Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and I have as my special guest today, Colin Bates. All right, Colin, let's get into our topic for today, which is trance mediumship. How about we clarify for people what is trance mediumship versus what some would call mental regular mediumship that people have in readings and in public demonstration.
Yes, absolutely. So hi, everyone. Wonderful, wonderful to be with you once again. And really, when we look at trance mediumship, what we are speaking of is an altered state of consciousness. Well, of course, everything is. And so whatever level of mediumship that we are undertaking, it is all a form of trance, because it's moving away from the physical moment of life in which we live and moving through our consciousness to a higher conscious level of experience, where you see we become aware of the other world, where the psychic, the intuitive, everything exists within that one glorious power. And so everything to a degree is a form of entrancement. I mean, meditation, contemplation, sitting in the power, communication, they all involve this different state of consciousness, you see. And because we live in the physical mind, which is what we call the beta states of mind, we are also connected scientifically, because we do love science, don't we? We've got the beta, the alpha, the theta, and the delta. And we touch an aspect of every single level throughout the day, with the beta being when we are most conscious within our physical mind, and the delta when we are within the deep sleep, which also touches the profound states of meditation and moves towards the unconscious, you see. So we actually touch this altered state of consciousness throughout the day. And with mediumship, you see, through the power of the will, because we are the doorway to the experience, we create it, you see. And what we don't always quite realize is that when we are within this normal waking moment, those subtle realms of experience are muted, apart from intuition, because that's always around, and instinct, you know, you could say that's there. But normally, you see, because we are so indoctrinated into living this life and being the physical boss, what we have to do is to begin to realize that to create an altered state of consciousness, we don't immediately move into it. We begin to lose ourselves within it, because it, like everything else, it's an experience, you see. And so how we move our consciousness into that other level of experience is all to do with our focus. And when we have an experience, what stops us from fully unfolding the experience is often the physical mind. The physical mind, stress, and our focus, they all have an effect upon that which we create and that which we become. We live in the physical mind, so we are within our conscious mind. Directly connected is our pre-conscious mind. Connecting to the pre-conscious is the subconscious mind, which is in two parts, personal subconscious and universal subconscious. But it is then the doorway to the super conscious mind. Isn't that extraordinary? I didn't even know we had one, but we do. It is the doorway to the superconscious mind, you see. And it is within the superconscious mind that the past, the present, and the future exists as one. And so when we begin to realize that everything starts at a point of focus, our intention, you see, we then begin to create. When we work with mental mediumship and we are communicating with the spirit world, we tend to be working in the second person, because I'm experiencing, you see, and then I'm explaining what I'm experiencing. So it's in the second person. You even have some people who do it in the third person, who say, and now I'm going to see who is here for you, and now I'm going to see what your mother wants. And so it takes it even a little bit further from the true experience. Now, the trance state is about working in the first person. And that is really creating a time and a moment to experience the very presence, essence, and personality of the spirit. There was an extraordinary medium called Ina Twigg, who was very, very famous in London in her day. And she used to do readings for Charles de Gaulle. Incredible. One day he knocked on her front door. Can you imagine such a thing? And asked if she would do a sitting for him. And of course she did. And she had this remarkable gift of where she would meet you. And then when she met you and she felt comfortable, she would then do a normal reading, but she would go into the trance state and the presence of the spirit would build with her. She would take on the essence, the presence, the characteristics, and the personality. And even her voice could be that of the mother. And so this ability to take that blending and becoming one more stage further, you see, is extraordinary. And that when we speak about trance mediumship, it has many different facets and many different uses within mediumship, and of course sensitivity. Mm-hmm. Now, when we are created unto this life and world, we exist already within the spirit. And mediumship is a facet of the soul. So before you and I were born, we had a conversation about life and about the pattern of life. And part of that conversation involved the spirit world. absolutely. And also at that time, there were connections made with the spirit world and the individuality of our own spirit, where we would come into this life and world, and there would be before us the possibility, you see, because I do believe in free will. Not everybody accepts that or follows it, but it shows itself through the desire and the awakening of the soul to its true purpose and individuality. So I believe, you see, that we come into this world with the spirit, and the trance and the development of the trance states is actually not just accepting that there is a totality of power. It is going that extra step to begin to experience individuality, because it is individuality. It's a collective consciousness, so there are many within the spirit world, but there may be one voice who is the spokesman of the power, you see. So as we awaken to the soul and the soul's destiny and its unfoldment and its connection to the spirit, we then start to begin to realize that communication is just the starting point, because the evidence and the proof give us that knowledge of sustainable life beyond physical death. But then we begin to realize that actually the spirit world is an intelligence, and that there are many within the spirit world who choose to minister to the physical world, the ministry of the spirit, and choose to support their mediums, but also support many within this life and world, see. And so when we speak of the trance development, one of the words that spring to mind more than anything is patience, is having that time, you see, to really become more aware of the spirit. And one of the techniques which has been given to us by the spirit world is called sitting in the power. And this is really creating a time to really simply be, because it's very much about moving into the presence of the power, embracing the presence of our own spirit, the living presence of you and I. And through that, we radiate love to the other world, and we start to let go of this life and world, and we begin to become aware of the spirit, you see. And sitting in the power is very much to do with that relationship that we create with the spirit. And when we look at communication, it's very much about our ability to be receptive to the spirit. So we have such techniques as meditation. In meditation, we learn to be the watcher. It is non-active of the mind. Contemplation is different because it's a subtle psychic pathway of the mind that's seeking to find answers. Whereas in meditation, you see, we are the watcher. We observe the process. And as we observe that process, it stimulates our sensitivity. And therefore the pathways of communication become heightened. Seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing, tasting, smelling, everything, you see. And then also because meditation can be visual, structural, it also teaches us to hold an image and to see things. It's all part of the same power. So what sitting in the power will also do for us is it teaches us to become one with the power, to embrace the experience, if you will. And of course, once you embrace the experience, you begin to feel the presence. You begin, I can feel it now, you see, as we're talking about the spirit world. All of a sudden they pop in. Isn't that marvelous? They just pop in. And so we begin to be aware of the presence. Now, the role of the guiding force of the spirit is not just given, and it is not by chance. It is earned through the evolution of the soul within the spirit. And so through that level of evolution, they are then allowed to come onto the physical life to support their medium through knowledge, philosophy, and of course healing, which is the greatest gift of mediumship, really. It is the power that unites the two worlds. So when we start to sit, and meditation points the way, because we learn to find that sense of stillness within ourselves and to recognize that everything is a part of everything. Everything is interconnected through the power of all life. And you cannot be where God is not. You cannot be where the creative force does not touch, because it's the very breath, it's the power of you and I and of the universe itself. And the greatest power of the universe is called love, for it is the first causation of the supreme power. Love, compassion, and understanding. For these are the powers of creation. So when we move in and start to really embrace an altered state of consciousness, we embrace the physical mind and world because that's where we are. But then we start to move our consciousness beyond it. And I always have my little sayings, so I'm full of them really. And it is beyond mind, beyond self, to the freedom of your power. So the physical mind actually moves into a quietness, but our consciousness rises through the power of the mind. You see, when you focus upon the presence of the God force, you are uplifted, and then you know the power has heard you. When you pray earnestly from the heart, there is this upliftment of light, of power, and of energy. And then we know that we are at one with the power itself. And of course, the spirit world exists within the heart of creation. So it's all one. It's all one, you see. And therefore, everything starts with a focus, you see. Now, my focus creates an intention. My intention creates a concentration. The concentration creates a power. And the power then creates the experience. So I'm moving, you see, towards it. Now, everything exists in that collective power. So this is why it's so important just to sit for the spirit, you see, because the energy of development is different for every facet, you see. And the trance is very passive. Now, communication, which is also a form of entrancement, is very active. I see it, I feel it, I hear it, I know it. Whereas at the deeper state of the trance is very passive, you see. But what is interesting is that even the passive state of trance touches the point of communion and communication. And the reasoning within it is that you then know that you're moving through the states of consciousness. And then within the trance states, you see, you then just take a deep breath and you begin to relax. And then you go beyond that point into more of a harmony, into more of a cooperation. We do speak of the word surrender, but very few people really surrender. Honestly, we always keep that, just that little bit of consciousness where we like to know what's going on, you see. So it's a state of cooperation between the energy of the medium and, of course, the mind of the spirit. And one of the misconceptions about the trance, you see, is that the spirit world enters the physical body of the medium. Cannot. No one can, because your physical body is the home of your own spirit, you see. And what happens is that as I will my power into being, and I move into that love force, the God force, there is an expansion that is taking place. And I begin to radiate from internally, which is the temple of our inner being, you see. And it is from that point that we begin to move into the different state of consciousness. So in a way, what is happening is that my conscious thoughts and energy is moving away from my mind and is becoming more aware of my energy. The best analogy for that is the fish in the water. So when we are the fish, we are the fish, but when we begin to move, we become the water, and we are no longer conscious of being the fish, you see. So you begin to experience in another way. So when I begin to radiate, you see, there is an expansion of the auric field that takes place. Now, within the auric field, we have the subtle bodies of the etheric system: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. But also within the center of that power, you have the etheric double, which is energetically connected through emotion. And it is through the etheric double that all communication takes place, not the physical body, although energetically it can impress and bring inspiration, you see, but it doesn't actually touch the physical body. It cannot, you see. There's no way that someone could just pop in and, no, it doesn't happen. Isn't that terrible? What some people just imagine happening, like The Exorcist.
Well, the movies
Yes,
tell people this is how it happens.
yes,
And what it is it's, I always think of it as the medium being an instrument.
yes,
And it's like a stringed instrument in many ways, because the vibratory forces as those strike the keys of a piano, or the a stringed instrument of strumming of the harp, the human harp, as it were, then there's a resonance that we are in with that particular spirit and vibrating at that rate of communion, and that assists the mediumship process.
it is. It's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful, Rena. I love that word resonance, because there is such a the only way that I can ever describe it is being loved by someone who knows you so well that they are a part of who you are. See, because they are. And we all have what I call major influences within life. And that's the pre-birth part, because they are there with us. I remember when I was 6 and I went to cross the road, and then a voice shouted, "Stop," almost physically. It was physically. And of course I did. And the next minute there was a lorry coming round the corner, and otherwise I would have been gone. Mm-hmm. And so such moments exist, you see. But this relationship with the spirit is really an extraordinary one. So as we move into that moment, again, the focus becomes really important, because energy follows thought. Mm-hmm. Therefore, when I am blending with the guiding force of the spirit, there is that energetic focus within me, you see. But when I'm doing a reading or a demonstration, then I'm also looking for the evidential, for the loved ones, the family, the friendships, etc. But they all exist in that same power, you see. And what I loved with what you said was how the vibration changes into that communion, very much there, of the power. And this is really where we then begin to understand that it's an auric sympathy. So I'm creating this communion, this wonderful harmony that you so beautifully spoke of. And depending upon that level of communion, we will then have the guiding force to a lesser or greater degree. Because, for instance, when we do addresses and we speak within a church service, that is a form of trance, but it's also a very light one, because it's not suitable to use the deep trance state in a public place unless it is designated for that area, because it is a very sensitive state. And so when we begin to realize that we can cooperate with the spirit, we can actually start to cooperate in a much lighter state. Leslie Flint, extraordinary physical medium, and was able to bring the direct voices of the loved ones from the corner of the room. And his guide was Mickey, see. And when he started, he was unconscious. He was in the very deep trance state. But once he got used to working in that way, he could speak just as you and I, and the voices would come from the corner. Estelle Roberts, one of our greatest transfiguration trance physical mediums, used to demonstrate to 3,500 and 5,000 in the Albert Hall on a regular basis. She even did one demonstration at Sheffield with a lady called Helen Hughes to 8,000 people. Incredible. And the people who sat in the first few rows of the Albert Hall could hear the whispers of heaven, and the people talking, getting ready to just bring their voice and to bring. And so it is an extraordinary ability, really, but it is one that is absolutely created through the power of love. And when we look at the scientific bit, just for a moment again, we exist in the beta, we then move into the alpha states, which then touches inspiration, meditation, contemplation, and then communication. The doorway to the superconscious mind is between the alpha and the theta, which we call the alpha theta bridge. So you're then moving into that altered state of consciousness where the trance state starts to really deepen. And as you develop that, of course, you then start to feel the presence, the personality, and the knowledge, the philosophy of the spirit then really does come into being, really in that way. And so what holds us back really from the trance itself is the physical mind, really. Because you reach that point, you see, where you have an awareness of the spirit. And then within the awareness of the spirit, you start to be aware of words that are dropped through the conscious mind. And they are there to be spoken. And when that happens, there is a slight coming back so that you're more aware. And then as you're more aware, of course, you turn around to yourself and say, well, I can't say that. And you stop yourself and it's ruined. So I say to people when I'm teaching them, I say, now, give yourself permission to experience. When you feel inspired, you have to say it. You really have to say it, because it's like a flow. When you take the cork from the bottle, what's in it comes out. But unless you take the cork out, it stays in. And it's the same with this flow of knowledge and of information. Once you start talking, see, you then begin to lose more of your own consciousness and you go deeper into the quiet. And then it's like listening to a voice in another room. So my own awareness within the trance state moves from here to here. And everybody will experience it differently. And what is so fascinating is that many people experience going into the power as if you move in and down, you see. And many experience it that you move in and you go up and out. And what is interesting is those that move into the deeper, going down into the power within the conscious feeling, will resonate to the deeper tones of music, like the mantras and the drums, and those that move and feel themselves expanding outwards will resonate to the harps and the strings. So it will be the higher notes. So you could experiment with sound to see how you resonate with the sound and how that then begins to come forward. True mediumship is a form of entrancement, I have to say, because there are many times when we are working with the spirit, even if it's whether it's for a reading or a demonstration, where you feel so connected to them that it is as if you are them, like stepping into the shoes, as I call it, or placing the overcoat round the shoulders and feeling the owner and being aware energetically of who they are and the presence that they bring, you see. And so it's very much dependent upon how we are able to do that, that creates it and moves us into the knowledge. And one of the things that I would recommend to start with is to work on your own inspiration, because you can move from inspiration to trance. You can talk yourself into the trance state very easily. So get a word or a sentence, read the word, the sentence, and then start talking about the word, and then let yourself go into the inspiration and record it. And what is so amazing with that is that you will start to hear the intonation within the voice. And all of a sudden, you'll start to use words in a way that you don't normally. And that's always an indication that the presence of the power is very much there. In trance healing, for instance, very much the mind of the spirit is guiding the flow of the universal power, the healing itself, to the root cause of the problem. And this is why you have to bow to the intelligence and say, thy will, not my will. Because if someone comes to us with perhaps the problem of the spine, if I was to focus on the spine and then bring the energy to the spine, that may not be the root cause. It may just be the symptom, you see. And when we have a condition of dis-ease, it will show itself aurically before it manifests physically. So it's an energetic process of healing that can touch the root cause and bring harmony back into the soul to remind itself of its own divine connection. So the spirit world and those in the spirit world have many different roles within our work as a medium. So when we speak of the healing, you see, you will have minds in the spirit world that have medical knowledge in some way and have this ability to be able to see into the need of the patient. And what is so interesting is that spiritual healing works from the outside in, so it works energetically, aurically, whereas the trance healing works on the inside out. So if you've got like a condition like even the size of less than a pinhead, then the spirit can direct the power to that point. And it's often a more concentrated and a more focused. And sometimes some trance healers have the voice and actually speak to the patient within the power. And what is interesting is that very few are truly diagnostic, because you have to be careful with that. But what they do talk about is your way of life and the journey of life, which can often be the cause of the dis-ease, you see. But there have been mediums who within the trance state have been extremely diagnostic. And perhaps one of the very well-known ones is Mr. Andrew Jackson Davis, the Poughkeepsie seer, who really was only educated up to the age of 11 And around his time of mediumship, there was another lovely one called Eva C. They were introduced to mesmerists, Anton Mesmer, the Austrian. And because they spent hours upon hours in the deep trance state, 3 to 5 hours, they used to have their own mesmerist who would place them into the hypnotic magnetic state of entrancement very quickly, bypassing all the different stages that we go through within the blending, the moving, the becoming. And it was in such a state that he could diagnose and prescribe in Latin, but he could write it. I've seen some of the papers. It's incredible, really. And he used to speak of a spirit influence called Galen, I believe, who was a Greek. Mm. And what is interesting is that in later life, he went on to take a doctorate in medicine, and he got it. So there was something there that resonated with him. Now, the point of this is that with the mesmeric passes and the moving into the deeper state of entrancement, once you've done it once, you can do it again more easily. And eventually he taught himself how to do it. So he didn't have the mesmerist with him all of the time. But in the deep trance state, which is leading to the physical manifestation, we are talking about the near unconscious and the true unconscious for the creating of the physical, at least to begin with anyway. I do feel that. And so in the unconscious state, that is actually when you have people speaking a language they do not know, because there is a bypassing of the conscious mind, you see. Mm-hmm. And then straight away, you're then moving into, and you can speak in a different language, and that'd be extraordinary. Can you imagine? I start speaking in a different language, and it's right, you see. I have seen it done, not often, but I have seen it done, you see. And that's very much to do with the cooperation of the medium and the spirit. And one thing that I would truly recommend, remember the wonderful words, where I sit is holy, holy is the ground, forest, mountain, river, listen to the sound, great spirit circles all around me. Find that place of sacredness and sit there on a regular basis. It builds the atmosphere. It creates the opportunity for the presence of the spirit to start to draw close, you see. And then, of course, this is when perhaps ritual comes in with the lighting of the candle, the incense, or the music. But the preparing of ourselves is so important, you see, because I'm still here, you see. And while I'm still here, I can't fully experience the other world. Mm-hmm. And then there is a shadow of the mind that will influence. So in a very simplistic way, what I do is I first become one with the breath, which is thousands of years old. You've got the Soham, which is the I am, the in-breath, the out-breath, the becoming as one. You can have the counting breath, where you start to lose the physical train of thought through the counting. But the power of the breath, you see, is the power of all life. So we become one with the creative force to begin with, you see, which is strength, vitality, upliftment, peace, and love. So you're empowering the senses, you see. You are moving into the very essence of the power itself. So the oneness with the breath, the oneness with self, through the oneness of self, radiating love to the other world. And that's very simplistic, but really that's what it is. And everything that goes on around here, just, it does, accept it. Don't focus on it, leave it, go back to the breath. And then the mind, you see, which of course is always, I always call the mind the restless soul, because it's always up to something, and you can't live with it, but you can't live without it. So you've got to do something that can then bring it more into a harmony. And what we do then is we watch the breath. So with the mind, I'm observing the breath, the ebb and the flow of the breath, you see. And on the outer breath, relaxing, releasing any stress, any tension, any thoughts. So it's like a letting go on the outer breath, an empowerment on the inner breath. And within the heart, there is the joy of creation, you see. So the prayer, because I'm a great believer in the power of prayer, is always dedicating ourselves to that which we are creating and unfolding, you see. From the highest that is within me to the highest of the universe, I dedicate myself to the service of the Spirit. The way of the Spirit is my way. The light of the Spirit is my light. I manifest my power right here, right now. So you're putting an intention into that which we create. And, you know, one thing is absolute here, is that power knows you. Unconditional love, you see. And what we don't always realize is that as I'm sitting to blend and to work with the spirit world is sitting to blend and to work with me. So they are learning as we are learning, you see. And that's why, you know, we speak of in prayer, we speak to the power. In meditation, the power speaks to us. You create that time where you can then move within your sensitivity and you can start to become aware, you see. And then, of course, the communion, which is such a beautiful word, of the two worlds begins to become. And of course, once we feel the presence, we learn to recognize the presence because it has similarity with it. And then, of course, when it's like meeting an old friend, all of a sudden you smile and you relax. And there you are. The power is there and the presence is there. And so I have never known anything other than pure love in all my years. And Lord, there's been many of those with the spirit world. And this sense of unconditional love is extraordinary, you see. So the trance states touch many different things: communication, philosophy, trance communication, of course, writing, which is also a physical form of mediumship, direct automatic writing. Of course, you've got direct voice, but that's more to do with the ectoplasm and the creating of that. The healing, which is really the presence of communion with the absolute itself. And so there's many more. And so inspirational writing, of course, as well as the automatic. But what is interesting is part of the development process should be that we just sit for the power and the awareness of the power. And of course, we don't do that now. We do it the other way. Everyone wants to talk to Granny, but nobody wants to get to know themselves. You see, isn't that wonderful? When I was a child, I wasn't allowed to sit in a circle for the spirit. I had to sit first for a year in an awareness circle. And then after a year, when I behaved myself long enough, I was allowed to sit for the spirit, you see. And when you think about the temples, like the temples of Egypt, they used to sit within the silence for years just to have an understanding of the power. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So really creating time. And of course, desire is the light of the soul. And when you desire, you create. And the colours of your soul are known by the spirit. They see us as beings of light because they don't have physical vision. So when I desire to be at one with the spirit, they can see those colours, are drawn to those colours. So when we move into the trance state, it is always a group effort, a minimum of at least 3 people in the spirit world. You've got one that helps to bring and create the energy of the atmosphere. You've got one that loves and watches over, and you've got one that is the voice. You see, and if they don't feel it's right, you won't do it. You see, if the conditions are not right, or the circumstances are not right, and that's really something that we should speak about, is sensitivity within mediumship.
Yes.
And especially within the trance state, because, you know, imagine if you're going towards the delta, which is the sleep state, and you're woken suddenly and sharply. It's a panic. Mm-hmm. So we always teach softly, slowly, gently. And if you find that you are shocked in some way, then go back into the peace, the harmony, the quiet, and then within 5 minutes you'll be fine. It will take it away. But in some of the deep trance states, when people have been disturbed, it can cause emotional distress and even injury. Because if we look at Helen Duncan, for instance, but she was in the very deep trance state of materialization, when the police stormed her seance, she was never the same again. She never recovered fully from it, you see. So you have to begin to realize the power of your own sensitivity and how we will everything into being, you see. I create it. I would say, when I smile to heaven, heaven will smile back. And there we are. We've got it, you see. But then to remember that when we do move into a moment of sensitivity, energetically, we're moving into a sensitive state. And as a natural sensitive, the physical emotional balance is always something that you have to watch. Definitely, you see. So when you have moved into that blessed communion of the power, you have to then also, I always move into gratitude afterwards, whatever I'm doing. And then that touches the power with a thank you. And then it comes back to me, you see, because you have to feed the power in some way. You have to create that which sustains and fulfills energetically. So when we've finished that time of communion, it's important to bring our awareness back into the peace, the quiet, the harmony, but then also to bring the physical mind back into an awareness of this world. Because otherwise you can then be hypersensitive to people, time and places, and that's not good, you see. And I always say, you move into the quietness, you move into the stillness. Our earth is the place of belonging. It is that of stability. You breathe in the power of the earth, you move back into the quiet, and then like the wings of Isis, you keep that power with you, see. And then that way you're then able to move back into the physical life and into the physical world. And as I said, the spirit world is learning how to be with you. And there are many people who take an interest in your sensitivity, but also in your work as a medium. And for me, you know, I remember Mavis because she was just adorable, you know. And she said to me once about the trance, she said, well, it's the icing on the cake, really. She said, because it's the embracing of everything. It's like saying, this is what it is. This is who we are. We do miss her because we loved her, you know. And that's the most extraordinary thing about it, really, is that it's a natural state of being. And in this age, as I have said, there are very few people that work in the unconscious state and are not aware of what's happening. But a lot of the old mediums didn't. And you could say to some of them who were extraordinary in their gifts, how did you do that? And they said, well, you know, I don't know. No, really, I really don't know. But I just know that when I close my eyes and send a thought to heaven, they're there. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate our process, you know, and that when we keep it really simplistic, you know, that it's my love that connects to their love, that connects to the universal love, and we all come together at that point. You know, it may be oversimplistic, but we tend to put structures in the mind where people say to us, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do this. And that's fine, because sometimes we need direction. But that which is of the heart and is celebrated of the soul will never be confined. It has to be really, you know, in a very natural way. And so it is limitless. I think that's how we should bring it. It is limitless in its expression, in its knowledge, and in the love that it brings to this world. And therefore, I would say to anyone who has an interest within that, is just sit within the blessed peace, seek the Spirit, for it is also seeking you. You know, that which we seek is already there. And, you know, we run around trying to find something, but when we say, oh, where is it? All of a sudden you begin to realize, well, you had it all the time. And it was in here, you know, like Dorothy. You always had the power to find home. You were always there, you see. And I have to say, it is the most extraordinary gift. And the presence of it, really, and that's what it brings. Not just a knowledge above and beyond that which we are capable of creating within the normal thought process, because otherwise, why would we if it didn't? But this sense of the other world, and really being aware and embracing the presence of the other world, is extraordinary. You see.
Well, I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit of some of the nuances of this of trance mediumship, back to the understanding for people that they're not allowing spirit to invade their body.
Oh,
Just
yes.
to that this super consciousness that you move into is, as Colin was describing, you're putting the blanket over your shoulders, you're wearing someone else's coat. This is you becoming such an empathetic medium that you move into the first person, as Colin referenced earlier, so that as you're speaking, it becomes I, but you are speaking from the vantage point of the individual and spirit. And
Totally.
can we just lean into that, and the safety that is there for someone when they do surrender, not just because of the divine presence, but because, as you said, there are at least 3 that are there in spirit to assist this process, and what that feels like to be in that state of surrender.
Well, I mean, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to put it, really. Because when we look at the different states of mediumship, mediumistic unfoldment, you could talk about the daydream, you see, because we experience when we're not fully focused in this life and world. And then if you look at how people used to foretell of the future, such as gazing into the fire and looking up at the heavens and embracing the clouds, etc. It's really about just allowing ourselves that time and opportunity. Everything starts at a point of presence in all forms of communication. That could be a feeling, it could be a knowing, it could be a seeing. But something just tells us that the presence, and when we're looking at the trance states, we have what we call the calling card of the spirit. And that is, energetically, you may begin to feel certain signs internally, externally, such as warmth across the shoulders, or the sense of something beside you, one of my main influences, I just call One Who Loves, and I feel a smile, and then I know I'm home. And so within that sense of home, you see, and if you look at how mediumship is created, it's the same thing, that there is a point of presence within the power. And the role of the medium is to become one with that point of presence, to create a harmony, a sympathy, a communion, where it can either speak to you or show you something. So in one way, the principle is exactly the same, that I start to already move my mind into a quietness and a stillness and a receptiveness, where I'm sending out those thoughts to the other world, be with me, see? And then all of a sudden, I will then start to be aware here how the presence is there. And then very much like when we do an intuitive reading, I step into your shoes and see the world through your eyes. It's the same principle, except it's much deeper. Because what I am allowing, and that's when we speak of this cooperation, is that the presence starts to influence, because remember, I'm creating an auric sympathy, you see. And the spirit world is the world of light and mind. Well, mind is an auric sympathy. Yeah. So the mind of the spirit then blends and becomes one with the energetic system of the medium. And it's within the degree of that blending, that becoming one, that you can start to take on the personality, the characteristics, the mannerisms. You know, how often do you do a reading and somebody says, you know, that's just what my mother said. Yeah. You know, and you're doing this. My mother always did that, or the rings. And what you're doing is you're taking on really the personality, because the personality is where you want to be. Because I always say to people when I'm teaching them, you know, description is lovely, but it won't take you to the mind, because the mind will talk to you. Yeah. Address and describing will not, it will take you away. So we always say essence, presence, personality, mind, you see, and then the mind can influence and talk to us. So what we're learning is to be receptive to that influence, see? And as you become receptive to the influence, you then become inspired. And as you are inspired, then from the superconscious mind, words will drop onto the preconscious mind and onto the conscious mind. And then when you are aware of a word, it's like this feeling of needing to repeat yourself. It's like it comes again and again. And the only way I can fully describe it is like pressing against water. And what it is, it comes and it comes, and until you release it, it will not manifest. And then as soon as you release one word, another word comes. And is that not like the flow of mediumship? You see, I'm feeling, sensing, becoming, and speaking, and following that flow of knowledge and of information. And that's rather wonderful, you see. And so this getting to know you is actually really important, because it creates, you see, and enables us to start to become more aware of the spirit.
And to trust. And to trust.
Well,
yeah, that's the big word.
That's the crowning glory, is to give ourselves permission to experience, but also to trust. And you see, this is where the big stumbling block in all mediumship comes, because when you move into that heightened sensitivity, what often rises within the consciousness is, should I, could I, am I good enough? See, it touches our own awareness, you see. But when you focus upon compassion, which is the ability to understand another person's need through the power of love, it will take you beyond your own insecurity and move you into the power of heaven.
Mm,
See?
powerful. It's so beautiful. I know we just have a few minutes before I wrap things up. In terms of trance mediumship, as you've mentioned before, it is something that takes preparation in advance of a person. Ideally, they would get their own thoughts in order and be of even mind, because you want to be in balance yourself so that you can receive and achieve
Yeah.
communion with another soul to such an extent that you can have the I, the first person, but
Yes.
still retain yourself, to know your own soul's identity so that you can return to that level of consciousness of the
Yes.
physical and of your soul. That's a very important element. Trance mediumship is not for everyone. It is for a select few, to some extent, who are willing to put the effort, the time, the patience, and the trust into that kind of process, and know that they need to balance themselves out physically and emotionally to do the spiritual work.
Yeah, totally. Because it's a transformative power. And once it touches the transformation, then we even begin to look at life differently. And even the people who are within our lives starts to alter and to change. And then it begins to bring in new influences, new energy, new light, new possibilities start to come into being. And of course, with the physical mind, you see, when I focus on the higher purpose, it takes me into a higher level of consciousness. Therefore, physical life and what is happening begins to recede, and I begin to become more aware of the other world.
And what's an important facet of trance mediumship, it's not an opportunity for people to grandstand or to be in that space of, look at me, I can do this, and I'm connecting with spirit, and you, the populace, must listen to these words of the divine channeling through me. It doesn't go into that realm. So I just wanted to make it clear to folks that are tuning in.
What I just have to say to you is, you always have to watch the power of the ego.
Yes.
Because the pure color of the spirit is the color of the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And one side is justice and one side is madness. Not really talking about the madness as such, but it's the diverse between that which is, embraced in a peaceful, loving, harmonious, and humble way, and that which then becomes the monster. Because the ego does have that potential. So therefore, everything that we do is always created alongside the spiritual aspect of life, which is devotional. Yeah. Which then brings us into the earth and our feet upon the ground. I have never known the spirit in its truest sense to be in that way that is demanding of others, but I have known of many mediums who have. So then you have to look at, the balance within life and the balance within energy. But as the medium, the creative ego, you have to have, because the creative ego is the wish to do well. And if you didn't have the wish to do well, you'd stand still. Yes. So that which enables us to reach for more in the knowledge that it is there for us is exactly as it should be, you see. But I have never known, and I was very fortunate that I came into the spirit when I was 16, and I'm well over 60 now. I've never known anything other than this pure love of the spirit and this genuine wish to support the lives and the journey of others. Yes.
And that's a matter of right practice and right intention, and also training, fine-tuning that aspect. Yes. And having, to some extent, mentorship as you do that, so that it's in that right light. Yes, but also as well, thy will, not my will. Placing your hand into the hand of the power that guides you
will very much lead you into that and into the energy of that. What we just have to be mindful of is that the power of the mind has an ability to create. And that is the difference between obsession and possession.
Mm-hmm.
That you can actually create something with the power of your mind that can ultimately be as a reality, because we know that thought is a living form.
Yes.
And I think really when you create something with the right intentions and the right purpose, then the heavens will open and light will descend. You know, that which is created through the absolute of the ego may be like the supernova. It may shine, but ultimately it will dim. And really the true blossoming of the power is through dedication, through love, and through the power of service, which is to mankind.
Any last thoughts for exploring trance mediumship before we close?
Well, my dear ones, you are an extraordinary being of light, of mind, of spirit. You are already connected to it, because it's the power from whence we come, for that which we return. We are born of this world, but we are also of the other world. And there are many wonderful minds, many people within the spirit world who watch over you, though you may not be aware of their presence is there with you. So any time that you can spend on just simply sitting and being and projecting that thought, I am here, be with me. And I don't know how you feel, because sometimes it's a lonely old road in which we tread. And especially when we're working in the mediumistic field, sometimes we can feel as if, you know, I'm standing here. But then when all of a sudden you place into the heart that actually you're not alone, that there is a host, an absolute host of those within the spirit world that are supporting and loving you, all of a sudden it becomes us, it becomes we, it becomes the team, it becomes that place called home. You see, and then you have that love, which is unconditional. And when you've moved into the trance state, it will always leave you with something of that love, that feeling of just being loved. And that is beautiful, you see. And of course, within the trance state, we can receive inspiration, we can receive healing, we can receive that sense of knowing that we are loved. And that is priceless in this world in which we live. Just as praying now for world peace is so important, because when we open our hearts and our minds to the spirit and we focus upon the universal power of peace, then our love becomes one with the universe itself. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Colin. It is always such a delight to have you here on the show. You bring such grounded energy, but it's effervescent joy that I always feel in listening to your words and noticing those connections happening in myself and in other people as you speak. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Can I just say what a joy it is to see you again and catch up?
Oh,
lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everyone, you can find Colin on his website, mediumcolinbates.com. If you'd like more connection with Colin, that's a good way to do it. And also look at the archive videos of the show. When you type in Colin Bates on my Facebook page or on my YouTube channel, you can find more Colin Bates. All right, everyone, I'll see you next week for another great show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Bye-bye.
Bye.